Good morning, I'm Marley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for March 30th, 2023. I want to begin with a question. Why is there so much hysterical fear being expressed of the development of a Chinese-Russian strategic partnership? How is that a threat to us in the West? Well, is it that there's fear that they're going to take over the world? That they're going to overthrow governments, that they're going to launch wars, that they're going to exploit and hoard all natural resources for their own private benefit, that they'll launch endless wars for the benefit of the billionaires running the global cartels? Because if that's what they're afraid of, that's what the US and NATO are doing. That's what we're doing. And the Russian-Chinese strategic partnership is being solidified because of the wrong policies, the wrong-headed policies being imposed in the West under the influence of the City of London and Wall Street. What they're afraid of is that it's an alliance of nations that's emerging, working with Russia and China, which will put an end to the unipolar order. That's what is threatening those who proclaim the strength and the necessity of a rules-based order enforced by the military of NATO and the United States. So it's time for us to think about what we've been accepting as normal in the West. Press censorship, permanent war, growing gap between the rich and poor, declining life expectancy, increasing violence. That's what our civilization is trending towards. These didn't just happen since Joe Biden came in. This has been an ongoing devolution since the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963 and the cover-up of those responsible for it and why they killed him. The biggest change has been the shift in the West from a credit policy which invested in scientific discovery, the basis for technological innovation, which increases the productive power of labor, which is the basis of real wealth creation, not funny money speculation. What we've instead gone is to a financial system which rewards speculation. We stripped away regulation. We've privatized everything. We've gone to financialization of virtually everything. And it's a financial system which rewards speculation. And when the bets go bad, they bail out the speculators. Now, that's the problem that we face in the West. And that's precisely what's being rejected by this China-Russia strategic partnership. But in the meantime, our populations in the West are being kept passive and stupefied by an increasingly banal entertainment culture, by such things as gossip, unhealthy fast food, drugs, and especially identity politics, which causes people to identify with the most narrow interest of a small group, as opposed to some kind of universal conception of natural law. So, when nations refuse to submit to this unipolar order, they're subjected to color revolutions, to coups, to wars, assassination. And that's the reason that there's growing divide between the so-called rules-based order and its adherents, mostly in Western Europe and the United States, and the rest of the world, what used to be called the Global South, but which is now becoming the global majority. Now, the basis for rethinking should be a discussion of the 10 fundamental principles proposed by Helga Zepp-LaRouche as the basis for the return to an order based on sovereign nation-states working together for mutual benefit. I want to read a paragraph from her 10 fundamental principles to give you a sense of what kind of philosophical underlying thinking is behind the move away from this degenerating rules-based order. She wrote, quote, "In order to overcome the conflicts arising out of quarreling opinions, which is how empires have maintained control over the underlings, the economic, social, and political order has to be brought into cohesion with the lawfulness of the physical universe. In European philosophy, this was discussed as being in character with natural law. In Indian philosophy as cosmology. And in other cultures, appropriate notions can be found. Modern sciences like space science, biophysics, or thermonuclear fusion science will increase the knowledge of mankind about this lawfulness continuously. A similar cohesion can be found in the great works of classical art in different cultures. In other words, there's a universal quality about the human being and the potential of human creativity to act on the common interests of all mankind for the benefit of all nations. That's why there's a rejection of this idea of the rules-based order. Think about the lament expressed by Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, who said, "We have failed, quote, to persuade or compel China to abide by American rules," unquote. Well, why should they? Look at the situation that we've created. Instead, what the Chinese are doing is they're intervening with a policy of peace through development, which is centered in Asia, but which is now spreading to Africa, to South and Central America, and which is open to include the United States and Europe. The Iran-Saudi rapprochement stunned everyone, but has been in the works. The move to reconstruct Syria and bring Syria back into the community of nations after the devastating civil war that was imposed by the West as a regime change against the Assad government. The potential to end the civil war in Yemen. These are just some of the developments in the last weeks. Now, if you look at the bigger picture, there's the BRICS alliance, BRICS Plus, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, which now has more than 20 new applicants for membership. There's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, we see the absurdity of Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States in Africa, telling the Africans, stick with us, we'll help you, we won't load you up with debt. We're not going to have a debt trap. She obviously is completely ignorant or in on what U.S. policy has been for Africa for the last 40 years. The debt trap is the Western policy, the International Monetary Fund policy, the rules-based order. What is she going to bring to Africa? Participation in social media like Instagram? Well, look what just happened in Zambia, where the Chinese worked on a joint project for a hydroelectric dam, which is increasing the electrical capacity of that nation by 27%. That's what African countries want. That's what they need. And instead, they're being lectured on the need to reduce carbon emissions and go to a zero carbon policy, which means no development, which means their raw materials will be exploited by Western corporate cartels while their people have nothing. So if you look at this bigger picture, last week there was a meeting in Moscow which brought together 40 African nations in the Russia-African Conference. In China now, what's going on is the Bao Forum, in which businessmen and leaders from all over Asia are coming together to discuss opportunities for investment and growth in the area where the world is seeing the fastest rate of growth, that is Asia. So why not scrap the unipolar order? Why not recognize that the direction taken by the US and Europe in the last decade since the collapse of the Soviet Union is leading toward more war and depression? Now, even as Macron is imposing rule by decree to push through an unpopular pension reform, which is basically to squeeze the French people for the short-term benefit of the shaky financial system, there are millions of people protesting in the streets. Well, at the same time, the French energy giant Total just signed an agreement with China to provide liquefied natural gas from the United Arab Emirates to be paid for in yuan, a move away from the dollar, de-dollarization for cooperation. The de-dollarization is not a threat to the United States. Either we move into a collaboration with other sovereign states based on mutual benefit, which is what's happening now with the rest of the world, or we'll be, as was described by one journalist, on the outside looking in. Despite all the hype about our democracy, you don't benefit from this rules-based order unless you're a billionaire who controls corporate cartels worldwide. So later today, I'm going to be having a dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche on this. It's open for your participation. It's at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central Europe Time. The link is down below in the description section. I know Helga would welcome participation and questions coming from all over the world. So join us. Let's not go down with the unipolar order.